Hi, I'm Amber,
Hi, I'm Jessie.
and this is
Glowing in Tech, powered by Clothing Black Females.
Amazing.
So today we'd like to welcome Ife, and Ife is a software engineer at Vodafone, and the common theme in her somewhat varied career has been that she's using insights and technology to innovatively solve real-world problems. Now we're going to move on to our tech topic in 10, and this is an opportunity for Ife to try and introduce and explain a technical topic in 10 minutes or less. No pressure. And it's something to do with something that you've specialised in work, and the aim is for it to be like a little bit of a lightning talk so that you can demystify an area for people who aren't so familiar with the concept. So what's your topic today?
I think I would like to talk about behavioural science.
Nice.
Amazing.
This is
So-
your bag as
Yeah, I
well.
love
Oh,
behavioural
is
science.
it? Oh, I love that. Wait, so am I just going to talk to you guys? Or
Yeah.
just
And
for
we
10
will
minutes?
we try and we will ask questions
Yeah,
and
please,
interject.
please do. I'm gonna need it. So I guess I was introduced to behavioural science more from the economic side, which I think it's its most like popular like implementation. So that's basically removing the assumption that humans are logical, which a lot of because we're not, which a lot of economic models are based on, and like bringing human behavior into that. And so actually my dissertation, do you know, it's weird when you like look and your life kind of makes sense and it just wasn't making sense at the time.
Yeah.
So my dissertation for economics was actually looking at herd behavior and the adoption of online platforms and like online technologies, and why suddenly you see like it's always like a herd of there's waves, there's like technology waves, and it's always like in waves. It's never just kind of like one person starting or two. It's like thousands, herds essentially. So yes, behavioral science.
When you were introducing behavioural science to your team at Vodafone, what was the context around that and why were you introducing that to them?
Thank you for asking that question. So basically, they had done a survey before I had started, and they had these kind of targets that they wanted to get, and part of it was changing people's mindset. So they started this thing called a kaizen, which is like a Japanese word for like improvement. And so they wanted to like, it was like a people improvement program. And so the first thing that they wanted us to do was focus groups, but they really wanted it to be like in a behavioural sense. So not just looking at people's answers, but also looking at like how they move when they answer it, or that kind of thing. So what I really did was like consulting the focus group. So one thing that I brought in, which was quite behavioural, was like an icebreaker. So you're like, an icebreaker, that's like everyone uses icebreaker, but it'd be like linked to the topic. So describe the team, and like and what colour pops to your mind when you think about the team, or like what animal pops to your mind when you think about the team. And I think everything that was said in those icebreakers, even though they seem kind of separate, was linked to what we were talking about, which I thought was like really interesting. And then another thing was in terms of surveys. So like the time of day that you ask someone something can affect their answer, or even just the order that you ask it. Like if you ask like, what is your name and how old are you, and something, if it could just basically affect, and you might not be giving the most honest answer. And so I think if you kind of randomize the order in which you give a survey, and it just basically it's just interesting to see different answers, like compared to like a control group, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Because people will be more like primed and biased to answer in a certain way
Exactly.
based on the things that they've already shared about themselves.
Yeah.
So why do you think it's important in technology now and the things we're building to include behavioural science theory in our products?
I think it's so interesting. So sorry. Another thing about the team that I was in was that it was office IT. So basically, the IT that the employees in Vodafone use, and so obviously the pandemic kind of nudged everyone into online. Even though there were always talks about the digital workplace, it's like every single workplace had to be digital. You didn't have a choice, and I think that was really interesting to see the effect of that. So nudging is like, you can nudge someone to do something. So for example, if I say, like the same reasons why we use like green for thumbs up and like red for thumbs down. If I put a red thumbs down, if I put a red thumbs up and a green thumbs down, you would think before you like did something. So green as a colour is already just telling you to go. So the pandemic basically acted like as like a nudge, like a kind of macro nudge affecting everyone to go into the digital workplace. Whereas before, you might have had to find a way to maybe like people that are kind of more used to the ways of working, you'd have to find like another way to like nudge them into that. And so I think in terms of tech, in terms of products, like when you're making new features and stuff like that, like I don't know if this is technically behavioral, but I know Instagram do like A/B testing. So sometimes you like don't have a choice, you have to kind of use it, you know what I mean? Instagram's kind of told you. So I think there are those things as well. But something I thought was interesting as I was thinking about this was like how behavioral is looking at how people actually behave, and then you've got like machine learning, which is looking at like people like using actual data to kind of train models. And I think there's definitely links there in the sense of like you can actually get data on people's behavior and like put that into your technology or your product, etc. So I think I need to probably do more reading on behavioral and like machine learning and how like those two kind of fit together. But
it's a very exciting space.
It is.
It is constantly changing.
Yeah, definitely.
It is really exciting, and it's like even the way that it's being used, because we were previously speaking about like when it's used for good and bad. Like we were talking about watching The Great Hack, where it was essentially a documentary shedding light on a company that used people's data that they collected from social media almost against them and targeted them with certain ads and certain information, which like led to very extreme views. So things like people actually thinking the earth is flat.
Yeah.
And like misinformation based on like so the left would see all the bad sides of like Donald Trump, and then the right would see all the great things and like saying, oh, he's right, and oh, this is a great point because this is happening, which is essentially just using our data to spread like misinformation and almost entice people to vote in a certain way. So certain people were given a lot of information about Brexit that weren't necessarily true, which enticed people to actually vote yes to Brexit. And so it's interesting to hear that companies are using it because at the end of the day, they want people to buy into their products. And they're using our data and analysing our behaviour to say, okay, you want this. And as a user, you don't want any ad. Like you're not going to entice me to go to, where's someone I would not want to go to? Okay, like, I can't even think of an example of somewhere I wouldn't want to go. Okay. I wouldn't want to go to the Sahara Desert, let's be honest. But if I'm getting like a general like travel email saying travel to the Sahara Desert, that ain't happening. But if you know from my behaviour and what I'm interacting with on like social media, from like the data points that you've collected, you'll know that if I see a picture of Bali girl, I'll be clicking on it, you know. And so it's interesting the fact that people are almost resisting this like collection of my data, what are you doing with it, at the same time not necessarily taking active steps into what that really means and how they can control it, because it's a very, very big topic. But then also wanting to see more personalised ads and things that actually resonate with them, rather than like anything that you spout out to everyone.
For sure. But I think that nudges in behavioural science don't always have to be used to like a sinister way. It can be like an improvement, a behavioural improvement. So for example, like the way that we now use smart tech and health tech, and we've got the fitness apps on our wrists that tell us that we've been sitting down too long, and all those kinds of things. Those are all nudges that are trying to improve our quality of life and our behaviours. And like I know that there are people that are now able to improve their quality of life without having to think about it so much, because they've got the assistive tech to do it for them.
It's definitely what you said. Like I think everything that can be used for good can be used for bad. And what you mentioned about like the Trump thing and stuff, it's like that's confirmation bias. So basically, it's kind of in the name, I guess. If you see something that you're thinking, or for example, if you're like doing a study or a survey, you need to be really aware that you're not. And this is linked to another thing in terms of like why I'm really interested in not just coding but also talking to customers. Like I'm generally really passionate about customer driven products, because I think as an engineer or as a scientist, whatever, you can always see what you want and like what you theorize. And if you're asking questions that are leading people to think that, who are you really doing justice there? So I think in terms of behavioral science, the more you learn about it, the more kind of aware you are about it, then the less it can have like, not that it's tricking you, because it's literally just looking at how we behave as humans, but the more you can undo its potentially negative or like misleading effects. There's a book and it's called How to Break Up With Your Phone. I think I told you about that.
You did.
And it's just like basically, again, undoing the parts of human behavior that are so automatic, which is why we spend so much time like on tech. And I think tech is great and your phones are great, but we actually do need to give like our eyes a rest. And I guess it's like positive nudges, as Jessie was saying, to make more and more steps to you actually using your phone, behaviors that are so automatic, adding more steps to those sorts of behaviors and actions, just encouraging you to think more before doing. So I would definitely recommend that book.
I need that book.
We need that book.
I was supposed to bring it, but I'm basically moving. But I'll send you the link.
Yeah, we'll
I
put
had
it
already
all,
packed it up. Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
We'll put it all in the show notes.
Amazing. So, are you ready for the tech tea?
Yes.
So,
Let me take a sip of
let's take a sip of our...
Nice tea, Amber.
Thank you. So, it's time for tech tea. Ife is going to be introducing a controversial take on something in the industry. And so, yeah, can you tell us what a controversial take is?
Yes. I have a question for you guys.
Okay.
Is every company that uses tech a tech company?
Oh. This
Thinking
is
of
a
certain
hard
fintech
one.
company.
Yeah. Because I do think that a lot of companies want to position themselves as a tech company. But when there's an intersection, so for example, like fintech banks, it's like, what is your priority? Are you prioritizing the tech or are you prioritizing the finance?
Yeah.
And I think that tech is almost like a sexy word now.
Yes.
Like, it's so sexy. It's just like, oh, we want to be tech because it just means, it's almost speaks for itself in terms of innovation, new, and something that people want to buy into.
Yeah, and who's leading the business decisions? Is it the
Yeah.
tech teams or is it not?
Yeah, and are you prioritizing the tech teams and listening to them? You know, because if you want to position yourself as a tech company, we assume that you're listening to the tech people, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that isn't the case.
Absolutely. So it's actually funny that you should say that because I was working in tech PR, as I said.
Yeah.
And another thing that like kind of pushed me out was, so the companies I mentioned, whenever it was like something a bit more sexy, so say like with Fitbit, they were tech when it came to the business side, like under our remit of tech PR. But when it was like the actual gadgets and doing the kind of influencer things, it would go to the consumer side. Same thing with the like fintech companies when it was more, they would basically either be corporate or tech. And it just seemed like tech was kind of like, in terms of a PR sense, we were just kind of given like the shreds, like the bits that like no one else kind of wanted to do. Because I think I was at a talk and someone said, you know, you wouldn't call a company now an electricity company. Whereas there are times where, like, when electricity, I know it sounds like what electricity's always been a thing, but when it was just becoming a thing, I guess the last kind of revolution, companies that were really good with electricity, that was their, like, competitive positioning. So they would be seen as electricity companies, whereas it's like now, every company uses, like, electricity. Like, you don't have anything special.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same way with tech now. It's like, every single company will have an element of tech. So I think it's what you said, like, who are you really listening to?
Yeah. And then so in terms of that, how do you feel about people who say I work in tech?
Yeah, I said, okay, so I'm already a bit crazy in the sense that, like, I want to be the only person to do something. I'm slowly realizing now that, like, there's so many like panels, and obviously, you know, I'm on a podcast called Coding Black Females, but I just feel like it's not really a niche to like be working in tech. And I think there's so much around, and I saw like a joke TikTok about like how people who are in tech are, and be like, yeah, so I work in tech. Do you want to know how I got into tech? Yeah, so this is the journey about how I got into tech. And you just end up saying tech without really saying anything. And so I think that as tech grows, and obviously as something grows, there's a lot more like kind of, as you said, fintech or like consumer tech or like entertainment tech. I just think there needs to be maybe a bit more like specialization, because I don't think everyone in tech does the same thing. And so I think when you say like you're women in tech or you're black women in tech or you're just someone in tech, you're not really saying anything.
That's interesting.
What do you guys think?
So this is a complicated one because tech is actually an industry. And so, for example, I could work for a bank as a software engineer and I wouldn't necessarily. It'd be interesting to be seen as a woman in finance. You see what I'm saying? Because finance is the industry, but my job is a technical job, which isn't like a financial kind of job. So for tech, it's almost like I could be working in HR at a tech company, and I'm a woman in tech.
Yeah.
And it's kind of misleading in a way because tech is, again, I'm using the word sexy because it is seen as a quite sexy thing right now. Like, people want to get into technical roles and in the tech industry, but what does that really mean? Are you talking about learning how to code to land a technical role? Or are you looking into to be part of something in an industry that is booming?
Yeah.
Because, like, everyone seems to know that tech companies are the ones that are more likely to pay more relative to, like, other sort of industries. And it's quite... I think this is very, very complicated because a lot of people are kind of exploiting the fact that people are looking to get into tech.
Yeah.
And they're, like, charging people, like, this is how I got into tech and how you can get into tech.
Buy my ebook.
Buy my ebook.
Buy my coaching sessions.
Yeah, and it's just a bit... Well, what really... There's nothing really here.
Yeah, because I think what you said, I don't think if you work in HR in JP Morgan, you would say you're in banking.
Yeah.
Like you would say you're in HR.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah. But on the other side, I'm like, at the same time, I do love the fact that, you know, I think the idea that you have to be technical to work in tech, I don't love that assumption. And so I'm all for, you know, expanding what working in tech really means, like to get kind of more people in and to make it more accessible. But at the same time, it's like when we have those conversations, or when you're doing a course on how to like get into tech, when really this could be how to get into kind of any job. And like when I was working in technology PR, but I was working in PR. I wouldn't say I was working in tech because I wasn't. That wasn't where like my skill set lay. But I also think there is like specialized technology PR consultants who have specialized skills on not just how to do PR, but how to do PR in a technology sense. So difficile.
Yeah. It is a really complicated one. And I think no matter what industry you're in, there's always a barrier. Like when I was trying to get into finance, I was watching a lot of videos on how I got my first role in finance and things like that, because it's quite a daunting process to go from secondary school. You're kind of just like, you know, doing my GCSEs, and then you go on to do A-levels, and all of a sudden you have to write a personal statement. And like, oh, I need to do a CV. What should I put on my CV? And you're at university and kind of doing your degree and like, oh, but what do I put on my CV? And so it gets to the third year and you're like, I have no idea how to make myself stand out. Like, there's all these like applications for this role and I really want it. How am I going to be one of 30?
And there's also all the people you're up against are people that are saying, since I was 5, I've wanted to...
yeah. And so I think like in general, it's quite hard for people to land roles in like industries. But right now, because we're in tech as well, we see it a lot more.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's been almost a shift since the pandemic happened and people empowering themselves by learning how to code.
Yeah.
Like, because they had like a lot of free time. Like me and Jessie, we both learned how to code during the pandemic and landed our roles by 2021 in the end. So I think it's a really, really difficult.
It is
difficult.
But I love that meme on Twitter where it's like, oh, my mum managed to log into her Wi-Fi, Black women in tech.
Yeah, there's loads of jokes about it, but I think like it's more concerning the fact that people are exploiting it.
Yeah, and that's the dangerous side, because... But then there's also the other side of that where people are gatekeeping it and like someone's celebrating the fact they've just got their first tech role, and then someone's like, well, you're not in tech.
Yeah.
And then that's like, oh, but then, you know, that's their way of, that's like their definition of it. So we can let them have like, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one.
Definitely. And I think that's where I check myself, because as I said, because I want to be the only person doing something.
Wait, why?
Like, no, as in I'm just like, it's probably like, not like, I don't really believe in like star signs and stuff like that, but it's definitely like a personality thing.
What star sign are you?
I'm a Capricorn.
Okay.
But like I'm like a Leo rising or something, whatever. But I think naturally, I just not that I want to be the only person doing something, but I like being different. Like I like having something that is different. But I think the older I get, the more I realize that the things that we think make us different you're not as unique as you think you are. As in, it's weird things that will make you unique. It's not because you work in tech.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like, that also isn't a personality trait. And I think the people that are gatekeeping it may like put their whole personality in that. The same way, like, I was speaking to my friend that like went to Cambridge, and I was like, I forgot you went to Cambridge because you're not saying I went to Cambridge before you say hello.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it's things like that. But I think in my note I kind of said, you know, the thing from The Incredibles where it's like, if everyone's super, no one's super. Like, have you watched The Incredibles?
Yeah. Because it's now a norm, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can't really have a superpower if everyone has it, and now it's just like, oh, we have this thing, and it's like normal.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But I think it doesn't really matter. I think what you said, like, whenever anything really matters is when there's like harm being done. And I think that can be done on both sides, whether someone's being like gatekeeped or whether someone's like exploiting. Because it's weird, because I've spoken on panels and like Black women in tech panels, and they kind of ask questions like, you know, how does it feel to be a Black woman in tech? And I'm not going to lie, like, I've been in spaces throughout my life where I have been the only Black person or Black woman, and I don't really see that, like, in my company, like, because it's global. So most of the people I work with are in Egypt. So, like, I'm a minority in my team that says I'm the only Black woman, but then also the only white guy is also a minority because he's not Egyptian. Because there's, like, out of the 6 of us, 4 are Egyptian. So I'm not going to kind of make it seem like I have to struggle so much. And I understand that there are kind of, it depends what company you work for, right? And like kind of what environment you are in. So I wouldn't put that on anything, but I cannot go on a panel and talk about how much like I had to struggle, because that just hasn't been my experience. Whereas like if I look at the HR element of my company, then they are minorities there. So I think it's really interesting, like just when we look at the conversations we're having and how it's quite easy to say, okay, I'm a Black woman in tech and like I have to like knock down many barriers and all of that stuff, where it might differ depending on whether you have a technical role or whether you are like working with people. Because I don't know about you guys, but for me, I'm like, either your code works or it doesn't. So like if something is like that, like it's either a yes or a no, you can't actually say that because I'm Black, like my code works less if it's working. So I find it, I don't know, I've never really found it to be like a thing, but I'm interested to hear what you...
So when I went to my first Women in Tech event, they were saying that so open source is basically when you're contributing to software. What is it?
Open source software and open source development is like open source software is software that anybody can contribute to and is usually free. And so when you're contributing to open source software, it's usually like volunteers and people who are doing it in their free time.
Yeah, exactly. And at a Women in Tech event, she was saying that most women, like their code is more likely to be harshly criticized, and they're not seen as a real coder. And like guys mess up and code all the time. And it's like, it's not seen as, oh, you're not meant to be in this industry. But it's almost like sometimes when a woman is contributing, it's more harshly criticised because it's such a male-dominated industry. Even though, for me, my experience hasn't been that. My experience has been, I'm the only woman. I haven't had to experience that. And sometimes it's refreshing to hear stories like from Black women to say, I'm actually not the only one. And it doesn't have to be our experience. But I also have friends who are literally the only women in their team. And I can't imagine that. Like, some of the big brains are, like, women. Like, in my team. And it's so empowering to see that, because before I landed around tech, I kind of thought, why is there so much work being done in this industry to get more women? Because I'm surrounded by women who know how to code. And then until I land my first role. And again, because in a virtual environment, I can't see everyone else. So I can just see my team. And my team, there are a lot of female developers.
But I also think that's part of the reason why it's such an attractive space that everybody wants to pivot to, because it's not like some of the more archaic industries where, like, finance, for example, is more, well, I don't know if it is more, but I can see that the attraction of going to tech is that it is a more, like, progressive area to go into. There are less rules and barriers to entry in most cases. Don't you think?
That's interesting, because I think there are a lot of barriers to entry to get into
What, compared
especially
to other
technical roles.
Okay.
Because remember, for tech, right? I can know how to code perfectly in React, but you want me to do leak code interviews, learn data structures and algorithms, have all these rhetorical things going on in the interview process, and I'm not. The thing is, like, for graduate schemes, it's almost the equivalent of being able to do the psychometric tests.
Yeah.
The psychometric tests have nothing to do with the role.
Yeah.
Is that what you did?
Psychometric? Nah. But I know them. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, but it's just like you have to pass them, or it's like you're not gonna get the role. And it's like there's people online who say they've been coding for 10 years and they wouldn't pass an interview to get the same role that they're in right now.
Yeah.
It's really tough. That's what I was kind of ranting on a bit about before. But I think that, like, on a kind of different note, I was having a conversation with this girl who we went to uni, but went to uni together because I worked first. She's like the year above me in the Vodafone grad scheme, and we were just talking about how we both went to girls' schools, and I think it's just like had such a positive effect on like how I view the world. Like, I know that there are like barriers against women. I don't even think that's a question, let alone black women. But because in like my primary years, that wasn't what I was seeing. I wasn't competing to be like, I wasn't competing against other women as a sense. I wanted to be the smartest in my class, for example. Yeah. Everyone was a woman, so there was no like sexism. Sexism couldn't like play a role. And I just think I could be in the most like racist, most misogynistic company. I don't wish that on myself, and I don't wish that on anyone. But you're not going to make me small. And you're not going to make me forget what I know and what I know that I can do. And I know that is such a privilege to be able to say that. And I was having a conversation with like some colleagues and how you literally just have to walk in with the confidence of a white male, because, you know, people may be thinking, and I don't think they actually think it as well. I think if they actually challenge themselves, they'll be like, you know what, I don't think that a woman is less smart. Because it's like, how can you actually think that? It doesn't make sense. But I think, given you can't change what people are thinking, but you can't change people's perspectives. All you can change really is what you do. And in saying that, don't put yourself in an environment, like as I said, I was able to think this about myself because of the environment that I surrounded myself in and the school I went to. So if an environment is making you feel small, then I think that's not great, and that's something you should look at leaving. But I think if you can know these truths about yourself and the confidence that you carry yourself, it's easier said than done. 100%. And it takes practice, and it takes like, I don't know if you've seen the video of Rihanna when she's like, they're like, how are you so confident? She's like, pretend. Like, what do you do on days when you don't feel as confident? Literally pretend, like fake it. Don't even fake it till you make it, because you're not faking it. It is there. You just have to continue to remind yourself.
Ife, thank you so much for joining us on Glowing in Tech. We really appreciated you having you on.
And sharing your story. So for our listeners, where can we find out more about you, and where can we follow you and continue to follow your journey?
My journey, probably LinkedIn, Ife Ojomo. If you want to know about me, I don't put much of my journey on my Instagram, but it's fe.oj, and my podcast is The Motion, TheMotion_. I'm sure you can spell motion, but you know.
No, it's great. It's great. And we'll put it all in the show notes as well.
Fantastic.
Cool. Thank you again.
Thanks for hearing my rambles.
It's been fun.
Cool.
And that's the wrap of part 2 of the Glowing in Tech podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to tune in next week. We'll have a special guest. And to find out who that special guest is, be sure to follow us on socials at Glowing in Tech on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. If you're on YouTube, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts. If you're on Spotify, turn on that bell notification so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave us a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So yeah, see you next week.